Good afternoon and welcome to the second event of our 2025 Project 515 series. It's our goal to help you do business better, and you all are the reason that we do what we do. This series is designed to help do just that. Our Project 515 series of real estate and development focused virtual events dive deep into three specific subsections of the industry. We did retail earlier in June. We're doing office today, and we'll be doing housing later in December. The series has a goal of illuminating future challenges and trends throughout the year while amplifying discussions with the region's key stakeholders that do business directly in the sectors and with those business leaders that are dependent on the health and vitality of the real estate industry. One of the reasons we put so much resource towards this industry is because it's connected into every different segment of the business community. And so we're glad to be bringing this program to you today. Coverage of the discussions are going to appear both in written and video form. They're going to be integrated across Business Record and in print, and of course, the weekly commercial real estate e-newsletter and on businessrecord.com. We hope, of course, that you subscribe to the CRE weekly e-newsletter. You can do that at businessrecord.com/sign up so you can stay up to date with the things we're talking about today, but of course, things that are happening next. We've got a great panel lined up for you today. Michael Crum is put together. He's going to be helping moderate today, and he's going to help you peer a little bit into the future of the office sector so that you can see what's going to be happening the rest of this year and a little bit further into the future as well. But before we do that, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors who are helping make Project 515 possible. Thank you to presenting sponsor Midwest One Bank. At Midwest One Bank, community is the heart of everything they do. And since 1934, the bank has embraced taking care of its customers in order to help its customers and communities succeed. Let's go ahead and play a short video from Devin Boyer, Market President at Midwest One.
Hello, and welcome to the Project 515 series. I'm Devin Boyer, Central Iowa Market President for Midwest One Bank, and we are honored to be the presenting sponsor of this year's virtual event series focused on real estate and development. At Midwest One, community is at the heart of everything we do. Since 1934, we have embraced taking care of our customers and those who should be. With our experienced banking teams and proactive approach to generate meaningful impact for all of our stakeholders, Midwest One Bank is committed to providing solutions and resources that will help you succeed. This commitment is one of the many reasons we are happy to support the Business Record Project 515 series. On behalf of everyone at Midwest One Bank, thank you for having us, and please enjoy the event.
Thanks again to Midwest One for your contributions and for helping support the series all year long. Our supporting sponsor today is the Iowa Finance Authority. IFA is helping to create opportunities for Iowans, communities, and businesses to thrive by connecting people with affordable financing and resources. Please welcome IFA's Communications Director, Ashley Jarrett, who's going to share a little bit more about IFA. Ashley, welcome.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the entire business publications team for putting together this fantastic series, as always. At the Iowa Finance Authority and the Iowa Economic Development Authority, our mission is really to help Iowans, businesses, and communities thrive, and that mission aligns just so perfectly with the Project 515 series. So with that, if you are all about innovation in real estate and housing like we are at IFA IEDA, I am here today to tell you that you need to be in Cedar Rapids with us September 3rd and 4th for the Housing Iowa Conference, along with 1,000 of our closest friends. Director Debbie Durham will be leading a state and national conversation on how Iowa is going to meet our housing goals by 2030. We know that we need an additional 21,000 housing units by the year 2030, and it's going to take some bold ideas and innovation to get us there, just like the Series 515 project is talking about today. So again, really proud to support the series and happy to be here. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Ashley, and thanks for the work you and Debbie and the entire team at IFA are putting into helping solve such a critical challenge that's only, I know, becoming more of a challenge as we go forward. So I know that Kathy Bolton, who will be hosting the discussion in December, is looking forward to us talking a little bit more about housing then. But today we're going to be talking a little bit more about office. So let's get things rolling. In a moment, Michael's going to kick things off, but you all have a role to play too. If you've got questions, feel free to put them into the chat. We might not be able to get to every question, but we'll do our best to at least use those to help guide what we talk about today. Also, the panelists have the ability to chat back with you as well. So if there's something that you feel like that they can help with, they'll be able to do that as well. We've only got an hour We got a lot of ground to cover. Michael, I know, has a number of questions lined up. So here to kick things off is senior staff writer Michael Crum. He puts together Commercial Real Estate Weekly each and every week. He's always covering real estate and development. He's the guy to go to if you've got stories to tell and share with the business community. Please reach out his way. Michael, go ahead and take it away for our discussion today.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Welcome to all of our panelists and everyone who's viewing today. We appreciate your joining us. Nearly 20% of office space is vacant in Des Moines Central Business District, and that equals about 1.9 million square feet of prime real estate property that's just sitting empty. In the Greater Des Moines area, about 17% of space is unoccupied. We're going to look at today what is the future of some of that space, and we have a panel of experts to help us explore that question and what some of those opportunities are that exist that are out there. We'll also explore redevelopment and construction and how, according to some in the sector, activity has maybe slowed or become stagnant this year. So during today's discussion, we'll try to answer why that is happening and when that trend might be reversed and what the future holds for office space in Des Moines, in central Iowa. With us today are Danielle Herman, principal of OPN Architects, Justin Lossner, senior managing director with JLL, Abby Ryland, president of commercial real estate, Sarah Hopkins real estate team with Remax Precision Urban Office, and Ryan Wiederstein, the owner broker of WB Realty Company. And again, thank you all for joining us today. We're looking forward to the conversation. We're going to open today with a very probably general question that I'm going to pose to each of you. What is the current climate for office space in central Iowa? Let's just focus on the first part of that question first, then we can come back to the second part later. But what is the current climate for office space here in central Iowa? Abby, why don't we start with you?
Hi, glad to be here. So it's interesting because I work with primarily small and mid-sized businesses to search for office on the tenant side, and there's a lot of activity. I think the interesting thing is that I'm seeing a lot of those smaller businesses who previously explored kind of shorter term opportunities, so 1 to 5 year max, pivot to something longer term, 7 to 10 year. I also see a lot of kind of that flight to amenities. So because they're not home anymore or their employees aren't home anymore, they want to be able to offer things like, a gym in the office or a shared conference room, a break room, things like that. So again, a lot of activity. I'm seeing a lot of willingness to commit to longer term opportunities and flight to those kind of amenities.
All right. And Ryan, why don't we have you join the conversation? I'm curious kind of what you're seeing out there right now for office space.
Yeah, office space. We play in the Class A office space primarily. I can't really speak on behalf of downtown, but western suburbs. I mean, we see a lot of companies that are moving from Class B space expansion in different verticals, primarily the insurance and finance sectors. Those leases and those proposals or RFPs are coming in where they are longer term leases. My sense is these companies are trying to get better deals locked in for the longer term. I suspect they feel like that market could turn. They probably realize there's less Class A office space available in the market, and they're trying to get a foothold on that space, knowing that 3-4 years down the road it may be even harder to find that space. So kind of they're staking their office space early. And I agree with Abby. I mean, the amenities is a big deal. The more amenities that are available, not even maybe in the project or the park or the development, but just around it as well. So that doesn't necessarily have to be an amenity that's directly there. Maybe it's downtown and you've got a fitness opportunity right next door in an adjacent building. So having the ability to have different services, whether in the building, in the park, or in the neighborhood, is big. So we see a lot of good activity on the Class A space.
And Danielle, let's bring you into the conversation. through the lens that you work through, what are you seeing as far as office space out there right now? And kind of what are you hearing from the clients that you work with?
Sure, yeah. I would start by saying, if we're comparing back a few years, we're seeing a lot less ground up new build. There's some, but where we do see that, it tends to be a bit smaller scale, or we might see more of an expansion through an addition and renovation of an existing building space. On the TI side, then, where we used to see, and especially with the amount of space that's available out there, maybe whole buildings being taken down and renovated or repurposed, or at least whole floors, we're starting to see a lot more of demising of space. And then it's already been stated, along with the demising, adding of amenities, trying to attract tenants via addition of amenity spaces.
And Justin, Ryan wanted kind of focused on the western suburbs a little bit. You might be able to give more of a downtown perspective, but what are you seeing out there as far as office space and the demand for office space today?
Yeah, the overarching comment that I would make is it's a hell of a lot better than people think. If you watch some of the national headlines, there's a lot more doom and gloom being reported than the good news. And I think to back up a half step, if you look at markets like New York, there was no deal velocity happening 3 years ago, and now they're leading the nation, and they kind of globally lead the office market. So for us, it's kind of a bellwether of what we think is to come, and it's already started to filter into the Sun Belt and Midwest markets. So far healthier than you think. Yes, Ryan touched on West Des Moines. Abby's right. Amenities are important. Ryan should give himself more credit. 7001 Westtown has a beautiful coffee shop and piano experience. I'm waiting for him to grow like a little goatee and a man bun or something to really top it off. But I'm sure we'll get into it. There's a crazy amount of leasing velocity that's happening in the Class A market, but you can't knock the activity downtown. It wasn't that long ago that there was a roughly 200,000 square foot announcement of a insurance company moving from West Des Moines to downtown. We've seen at Riverview, for example, the former Federal Courthouse Annex building, which is going through a complete remodel, to Danielle's point, didn't build a new building, shelled out an old one and built it new from the inside, right? And construction prices have moved a little bit, interest rates have moved a little bit. So we're starting to see those long-term companies allow for a project like that to happen. So they may not be building new, but they're refreshing product that is well located and has the ability to really perform. So there's 80,000 square feet of new leases and I can tell you in my 20 some odd year career, at rates that I've never seen downtown. So a lot of really good examples of really positive stuff that we've seen in the office market, especially within the last 12 months.
Justin,
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, just quick question on the lesson from New York and what you're seeing there. What's the takeaway there that you're seeing starting to trickle to other places?
Yeah, it's such a fun topic to get into when you get into return to work. So I had pulled some stats. We are now only 5% within the entire US of fully remote work, which means the balance of that, companies have started to make the decision of you're going to be in the office at least some amount during the week. 41% of companies nationally are at hybrid, which means on average 2 to 3 days a week, but 54% nationally, companies are fully back to work. Government was a big example of that, and it's kind of trickled down from there. So what that means is, you got a market like New York with a lot of major national companies who have essentially said, you're back to the office. And that's why they're kind of leading the charge with the demand that started to happen there. And then again, you've seen that trickle down into the Sun Belt areas and the Midwest markets where you've got these pockets, Des Moines being a good example where major companies have just said, hey, it was fun while it lasted, but time to get back to the office.
So Justin, I'm going to stick with you for a second, and I'm going to kind of go around the horn here. But with that return to work, return to office,
I'm going to give him 1 second to see if that internet comes back. Otherwise,
Chris is the answer.
Driving into the into the next one. So while Michael gets his internet back, I think where he was going to be going was talking a little bit more about that. When you're thinking about that return to office aspect, what are some of the other things you're seeing here locally, and perhaps what effect that's going to have on vacancy rates here?
Yeah, I guess I'll touch and then you guys can go from there. But yeah, everything that everyone kind of opened with is absolutely right. It's amenity driven. We've seen a lot of actually workspace design concepts where if we talk to our furniture providers, the trends that they're seeing are a lot more areas where you've got soft seating landing areas. So it's kind of bringing that home to the office feel. The other interesting concept that we've seen a lot is childcare. That was a big reason why a lot of folks were having a hard time doing a successful return to work, is the balance of the family life versus the office life. So, the proximity to childcare options, whether it's in the space itself or the support for that, is something that people are really focused on as well. But, ultimately, it's the lesson that we started talking about in 2020 is how do you collaborate? How do you train? How do you mentor? How do you keep a really positive, healthy company culture? By doing it on a video conference? And the answer is it's really tough to do that. The one last comment I'll say too, which really surprised me, we were on a national call 2 weeks ago, and the area that I never thought would see a full comeback is the call center world. And lo and behold, we're starting to see those jobs come back too. So in some of our major pockets, we haven't seen it as much in Des Moines, but in some of the major markets, you've actually seen call center traffic return back to the office place as well, which again is just really
do you know what's behind that or driving that? It seems like one of the most likely ones to stay.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So the quick answer is management and efficiency of employees. And you sit here and think, gosh, if you can count how many calls someone's doing and you can check a quality, reassurance tool or whatever, you should be able to successfully work from home. But again, shockingly, I think what managers and leaders are saying is it's just so much more efficient and successful to actually have the people collaborating and working together, even if they're on the phone most of the day.
Abby, I'll go to you next on that same topic. What have you seen in that space as far as the return to work and maybe the effects here in the market?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off what Justin said, I think that a lot of CEOs, presidents, owners of companies are really putting a lot of value into the collaboration and productivity that they don't necessarily see as much of when people are at home. I also think people got burnt out of video calls. Like it's cute to like sit in your sweatpants for a week, maybe a month, and then it just isn't. And so I think in speaking with a lot of those small business owners, it was one of those things where they wanted that face-to-face time, the ability to develop employees, and to have conversations that allow people to grow professionally and personally, weren't happening on video. And so, I think of kids too, like my kids, obviously everyone's kids took some time off school, and those social cues, facial expressions, things like that, and communication are so important in the workplace. And I think, although efficiency is something that a lot of people look for, I think that there was a pivot in, seeing efficiency versus productivity, collaboration, and the benefits of those. And so, most of the clients that I work with are entirely back to work. Again, I work with a lot of small businesses, and they don't get what they need out of people, I think, when they're not around. And because they're typically in smaller groups, they're not in like a cubicle farm. They really want to have that FaceTime with people. And I think the employees value those relationships as well. And so they want to be there. It's just a matter of creating a space that people want to come to. And so I know a lot of landlords have been open to improving on that B or C class space to get those people into the offices. And a lot of my small business folks are finding that, the price point is a little bit competitive because there is some vacancy, but they can also get tenant improvements that make that space feel the way that they need it to feel for people to come back.
Ryan, anything that you're seeing that you want to add into the equation there?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything they said on that. The other thing to really keep in mind as employees come back to work, and building owners, landlords, property managers, whatever, are trying to find ways to attract. Yeah, the amenities is huge, but also having space or a workplace that's closer to their home means a lot. Now in Des Moines, we're blessed with short commutes, and everything's relative though. People move here and they're like, I'm fine driving 30 minutes, until they realize that there's a grocery store within 2 minutes of anywhere you live. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, that might be part of the driving factor when companies are making decisions. Well, okay, if we're going to if we're going to go back to work, which, you know, I feel like almost everybody I've talked to is all fully back. You know, they want to make it appealing to attract and retain talent in their organizations. And part of that might be, you know, the commute time. It's a 10-minute drive or it's a 12-minute drive. Schools and daycares being between their home and their workplace is a critical factor. You know, it doesn't have to be right there next to them or in the project, but it does need to be convenient for them. So I think that's a factor that people look at, and the market does compete with other markets too. And I think that's one thing that maybe gets lost a little bit is you've got some pretty affordable space in other markets, but that's the one thing Des Moines has going for it. It's got a great employment base. You have short commutes. Space is relatively cheap still. And there's a lot of pros for those employees to come out and look, whether it's downtown or the western suburbs. There's some real pros there that employers are probably focused on.
And then Danielle, maybe perhaps what you're seeing from working with clients is on their office space, what maybe some of we've heard a little bit about some of the amenity components of things, but just curious how people are taking an approach from an architectural standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question we could probably have an entire panel centered on just this, but maybe pulling a few threads from what everybody said. Justin started talking about the kind of soft seating and pulling in things that felt a little bit more residential. There's actually a term for that, residential. I don't know if you guys have heard of that terminology, but that is a huge trend. And it really gets at the idea of we don't really talk that much anymore about work-life balance. We talk a lot more about work-life integration, which gets at many of the things that Ryan was just talking about as well. How do you bring those things together to encourage people to be back in the office? And then when they are in the office, the environments that we're providing, or a lot of the trends that we're seeing, are balancing all of those aspects of, are you there 2 days a week, 3 days a week? Because there's still a lot of virtual and hybrid meetings. And for those that are in the office 2 to 3 days a week, a lot of the big companies have a very specific timeline in place for when they want everybody back full time. But there's still an acknowledgement that the trend of virtual meetings and the efficiency that comes with that isn't going away. So the office environment has to adapt both from a technology standpoint, but also the kinds of spaces that we provide. And when people are in the office, we want to have those social spaces that encourage collaboration and culture building. But then we also need more private, heads down, smaller focus spaces that people can go take a virtual call without disrupting everything that's going on around them. So the balance of how an office is organized and the way that the work environment just needs to kind of accommodate different situations has shifted a little bit based on everything we've experienced over the last 5 years.
I see Michael's come back, and so I'm going to give him a second he's back from being remote, which is
working from home today. That's one of the other positives, right? Better connectivity.
Well, what's funny is
we figured I'd try some dramatic effect stuff today, and I hope that worked.
We need to get you some office space, Michael.
We actually do this intentionally to a degree on these, because we don't want to have everybody in our office, because if it goes down, line of succession. So this worked out the exact way we planned for during the pandemic when we were doing these back at one point. So I'll ask one last question and I'll turn it back to Michael so he gets his feet set. When we've talked about this, it's still showing up in the numbers, the vacancy component. So I'm curious, when do you think that that's about to start accelerating, that some of that'll be absorbed more here in time, or do we just think this is kind of the new normal to a certain degree, and maybe we ought to just start talking about it in that way? So I realize that's kind of an amorphous question, but are we going to continue talking about the effect of return to work in the years ahead, or is this going to just kind of be the new way we talk about it?
Yeah, I personally think it's less of a factor as things go on. I think employers realize that employees are more productive when they're in the office. Everybody wants a work-life balance, but sometimes that means segregating yourself from your office. Working at home and the day ends and your day just keeps going. I mean, I worked at home for a while early on, and 5 o'clock rolls around. It's like my day blurred into my night. I'd never stop working anyway, but it was kind of like, You know, that there is some quality to, you know, there's something to be said about being able to step out of the office and you're back in your personal life and dealing with that versus just, you know, I'm just at home, now I'm working, now I'm, you know, dealing with these things personally. I think this conversation goes away unless we have another fabulous
thanks for the asterisks. We appreciate it.
Yeah,
Stop right
We don't
there.
want to be the
Stop
jinx.
right there.
So
I just knocked on wood, everybody.
Yeah.
I'd
I'll
say too.
jump into.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Abby. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I do believe that there's gonna be a lot more absorption. I think again, it took a minute for a lot of businesses to determine what the future was going to look like. I think now they have a much clearer idea, and so they start that process of seeking out space and deciding, you know, what that floor plan looks like and how they want to utilize it. You know, in our world, a lot of times a transaction can take, you know, anywhere from 9 months on the kind of short end to years. And so I think we're just now seeing the kind of fruit of the labors that we've been working on for, you know, the last couple years. And because there's a little more clarity in the, you know, we can talk about economics all day, but I think because there's clarity about the vision for the future of companies, we're just seeing a lot more commitment to those spaces. And I think we'll continue to see that. It just takes a little bit of time for those to really land and become, you know, actually occupied.
Yeah, it's spot on to piggyback on that. We're tracking 1 million square feet of active deals in the market today. And 3 years ago, those companies were either cautious or just kind of, you know, slow playing a little bit, if you will, any sort of long-term decisions. And again, construction prices had spiked and there's all these concerns about supply chain and just this litany of issues that cause volatility, which cause people to pause. And so a lot of that has loosened up. So two other kind of things that we're watching, conversions are still happening. So there's the discussion around highest and best use on product, right? I think Finance Center converting into a high-end residential project is awesome. It's going to be such a neat use of that space. Same thing with 2 Rouen and a handful of others that we're tracking. Nationally, we actually saw more space convert. There was 8 million square feet of active conversions of office space when compared to 7.7 million square feet of deliveries. So it's a national trend, and we're kind of washing this wave of, you know, space that was no longer at its highest and best use. It was dated office space that didn't meet the needs and standards that Danielle touched on to a lot of clients. So Abby's right. We're working through that process now. And, you know, if you looked at today, there have been more 50,000 square foot leases signed in the last few months than I've seen in the last 5 years combined, for sure. But I mean, if you would see a 170,000 square foot lease sign in our market a year, that's kind of like we're doing great. And now I can count at least 7 of those actively in the market today. So the levee is kind of broken and people are starting to really figure out what their new long-term strategy looks like. So I would fully expect the vacancy to decrease certainly within the next 12 months and beyond that.
I'm wondering if you were seeing differences in space and size of space when we start talking about conversions. Are there certain sizes of office that just aren't suitable for conversion? I know floor plates plays a big role in that, but I'm wondering if when we start looking at square footage, are there just spaces that just aren't suitable for conversion because they're just not big enough?
Yeah, I mean, downtown
specifically.
If you have roughly a 17,000 center core floor plate, meaning it's roughly a square, and you've got your elevators and all those vertical penetrations in the middle of it, and you can build units around it, space comes available in its office, you're going to find a list of multifamily guys that'll come in and convert. The total square footage of that, I mean, we've seen them in the 150 range. We've seen them up to the 250 range, 250,000 square feet. Once you get beyond that, I think it becomes more of an underwriting exercise as to where we're at on per square foot rates for the multifamily units, what's the leasing velocity, and you know, all the underwriting that goes into it, which I'm not an expert on. But you know, what I can tell you is we're tracking a couple other off-market downtown opportunities that fit the mold, if you will, for conversion, and there's already pre-interest in it.
Abby, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting from my perspective, repping smaller tenants oftentimes because a lot of the conversions don't fit that need. So I find that when I'm doing a market survey, a lot of the downtown structures just don't work well for converting to like that 1,000 to 3,000 square foot need. A lot of them cater better to something a little bit bigger. But spot on with what Justin said. I think we're finally, as a a community, I would say, we're finally figuring out what the best uses are for these spaces. We're putting in the work to underwrite the floor plans and what really maximizes kind of the use, the dollars coming in for investors and developers. So it's great to see some clarity on what the spaces should be or how we can best utilize, particularly downtown. I selfishly, I would love to see more conversions with those smaller opportunities. There are so many small businesses out there that do have a challenging time capturing that 1,000 to 3,000 square foot need. And there's just not a lot of inventory for that, particularly inventory that fits in kind of the class B and A. So that's a challenge. I'd love to see more of it. It's really hard to do. I get all that.
Ryan, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Uh, Feel free to add your thoughts about conversions, but I'm also just wondering a little bit about, we've talked about Class A space and kind of the flight to flight to quality. I'm wondering, particularly in the western area of the metro, what other kind of redevelopment opportunities are you seeing, whether it be conversions or just redevelopment to meet the needs of companies as they return to the office?
Um, conversions, I haven't really looked at any conversion opportunities. Western suburbs, it's obviously a lot of new development, but we do have the Midtown area now that is probably poised for some really nice redevelopment through there, and it'll be exciting to see what happens with the Valley West site. That whole corridor on West Town between 50th and 22nd Street in West Des Moines. If the buildings are good and they're going to be retained, you could. I mean, the Regency West deal, for instance, like that probably, in my opinion, gets scraped, and there's 650,000 square feet of office space that's no longer on the market. And now, whether what its demand was probably questionable, but that's an opportunity in that corridor that really improves that area. So it's not even just about conversion; it's about just true raising the property, rebuilding it. If it's mixed use, adding multifamily, you get every apartment's a rooftop essentially. You're going to get more people there, and there's a lot of office space through that section, and you're going to increase a population probably. You get 96 acres between Valley West and Regency West that probably has a lot of multifamily on it at some point and some mixed use. So that's the other thing. It's like, yeah, you can look at these buildings and can they be converted to residential? It's pretty tough. That's above my pay grade. I can't really go down that road and understand how to make that work. I'm not a multifamily guy either. So, but that's an opportunity. Unfortunately, you probably won't see new office construction, especially spec office construction, done for a while. So those sites need to be something else and need to really add some value to the community.
What are some of the factors affecting what you just described, Ryan, as far as really no new spec development or construction? Do you see that as a trend that will begin to reverse itself in the coming years, or why is that happening, and do you see it changing? Let's stay with you, Ryan, and we'll kind of come back around.
I think the absorption of the office market has to continue. I feel like we're on a good trend, at least in the sectors that I play in. And when that absorption is there's companies out here. There's good developers in this town that have the wherewithal and the capability of going out and building new office space. but it's a math exercise. If you're paying $400 a square foot for an office build out, the rents you can't make those rents work. If you have a really nice updated building that was built prior to COVID before construction prices went up, I don't even know if those numbers work from a cap rate standpoint, especially when you're looking at sixes on debt. I think it'll be a while before anybody builds spec. I think everybody else probably knows it too. It's like there's a lot of owner occupied users out there trying to pick up some buildings, trying to take advantage of some lower priced assets, going in and renovating them. I think there's probably a good trend in that. I don't think there's going to be a lot of spec office coming on the market, but I could see some owner occupied facilities being constructed. It's just absorption, interest rates, construction costs. They're not aligned to promote any sort of new office spec.
Okay. Danielle, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, and I apologize that I was kind of vacant there for several minutes while I tried to reconnect. So if you've kind of covered some of this, I apologize. But some of the trends that you're seeing in redevelopment and conversions, what specific amenities, what specific features are you hearing from clients that are must-haves in their office space today?
We talked a little bit about this, but your question is more specific, and I think it's a really good one. So I'll just start to list kind of a few of the big ones that I get asked about a lot. And I think Abby mentioned a few of these actually also. Fitness comes up a lot. Health and wellness. That may be anything from a wellness room that can double as a mother's room, things like that, how those are integrated. Those are things that weren't always in some of our older building stock that we're renovating. Some other things, outdoor spaces. And I'm looking around and I'm guessing I'm going to see a lot of head nods, whether that's terraces, developing outdoor amenity spaces that are at grade patios, water features, connections to bike and trail systems that are already being developed within cities, anything that can increase the connection to outdoors. And that's really part of a larger trend. I'm sure everybody at this point knows what the term biophilia or biophilic principles means. Anything that we can help kind of connect people to more natural materials, more green spaces, or bring those things into spaces is a huge trend. And I think that's an outcome of COVID as well, that there's just been a greater focus on, if you're going to be at work and with your counterparts, that how do you do so and do that in a healthy way and maintain people's both mental well-being and their overall physical health.
Justin, a couple of years ago, you and I had a conversation, and it revolved around who maybe some of the biggest, where the demand for office space was coming from. And you mentioned back then that I think it was like therapists, counselors, mental health providers, that was kind of one of the bigger, biggest sectors looking for office space back then. Has that changed? And if it has changed, who are some of the big users that are looking for space today?
Yeah, yes, good memory. So we still see therapy. I know Abby's, you probably have like 8 or 9 of those running around right now. So definitely still an active requirement, but we have seen a little bit of a transition. So engineering firms, for whatever reason, over the last 8 months, have I think been very successful and are sitting on some capital. So we've seen quite a bit of expansion activity from engineer companies over the last couple of months. And then I'll tell you more recently, insurance has been very, very busy. Insurance and financial professional services. So part of that demand, I think, is coming from the fact that many of those insurance companies have historically been more conservative about decisions that they've made, and now they've started to feel more comfortable about how to underwrite, a move or a shift or a change. And so we've seen significant activity in that sector. One thing Ryan touched on too, I want to come back to. Owner user activity over the last 8 months has been very, very strong. We've interviewed for a lot of assignments where, a group probably had more space than they needed, was ready to make a transition of their own, felt comfortable that they could go out and exercise on that. And so we're willing to get out of an asset that they've owned for however many years. And what we found is that sale activity that was non-existent from, call it 2020 to 23, maybe a little bit in even in 24, has been very, very strong. I would cite 6000 Westtown as an example. American Equity moving downtown creates 120,000 square feet of vacancy out west. And that property never officially hit the market and sold to an owner user. and that's, again, that's a sizable office building. It's not a new construction project. You can go out and publicly pull what the per square foot sale price was on that. What I would say is it's a fraction of what it would cost to build it new. And so we have seen a lot of that activity. We expect to see a lot more of that activity of some of these assets that are either quietly on the market or, publicly on the market today, especially in some of the stuff that we're working on downtown, that will transact and will transact with a component of owner user activity. So, and then from there it goes into Danielle's world of, how do you make it to where people want to come to it? And it's all the stuff that we just kind of talked about, but really, really decent activity on that side of the house.
Is it taking longer to get deals done than it was maybe a couple years ago? What are we seeing with that?
Yes and no. Some of the stuff is, but I'll tell you, I think we've had a few tenant rep interviews recently where, they're starting a little farther out, the user, but they're ready to go. And candidly, I think for those people that have kind of gotten to the point mentally where they're ready to make some decisions, they're ready to move fast. But certainly we work with plenty of projects. Abby alluded to it earlier. I've got a project that we're working towards a closing on that's been 2 years in the making. And so it's not uncommon to have those multi-year projects, but I think we're seeing less of those.
Ryan, I know you've had some leases that have been announced in the Atlas building recently. I don't think you're ready to announce who those people are yet, but to answer that question about how long it's taking deals to get done, what are you seeing? Are you seeing it being longer, about the same, or I'm just curious what your experience has been?
I mean, the larger the client, the longer it takes. I mean, we had a 7,000 square foot deal signed 2 weeks ago, and I think starting conversation to lease signing was 30 days. But we have a full floor user on 5. That's that conversation, and kind of getting that to the finish line was probably, I don't know, was that 12 months, Justin, at least? So yeah, I mean, it just depends. I mean, the larger ones have to plan more. They're looking out way in advance. A company that's 7,000 square feet or 10,000, they're downsizing or expanding, they can just be more nimble and they can make that decision knowing that, hey, their lease is up in February. They only need to be 6 months ahead of it. Where a company that's 100,000 square feet, they need to be out, 24 months and start really understanding what's available and where they have options. So yeah, bigger the deal, the longer the negotiation.
What about lease rates? Abby, what are you seeing about lease rates? Have you seen a change or a trend in those? And if so, what factors are influencing lease rates today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I focus primarily on office and retail, and between the two of them, lease rates for existing property are actually pretty stable. So I haven't seen a significant dip, but I also haven't seen any significant increases. I think when you start looking at new construction, and again, there's not much for office, but significantly higher due to those construction costs. And so a lot of what I see isn't so much a rate change as it is getting creative with free rent, tenant improvement allowances, and things like that. So I've seen a healthy increase on a lot of my deals with the willingness to do tenant improvement allowances or to turnkey a space, just create a space that is ready for the tenant to move into, which really eliminates some of the challenges that tenants sometimes have. I think especially for the smaller businesses locally owned, wrapping their head around taking on, some debt or financing some construction costs in a building that they don't own, and going through the whole process, with a bank or with the SBA or whatever the case may be, can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming. That can sometimes slow the process down. So I love when I can call a landlord and ask for a turnkey space and they give it to me. I think that streamlines a lot of the challenges that I find in my world. But as far as rates go, there's a lot of stability, and I think that's nice. I think when I'm comparing properties across certain sectors of the market, whether that's the suburbs or downtown, they're really consistent, and so tenants are really able to make a choice based on the highest priority for their space as opposed to huge variations in those rates.
I'm going to segue to lease terms. Are we seeing people be more conservative and try to negotiate shorter terms based on maybe some uncertainties that continue to exist? Or what are you saying?
No, I think it's quite the opposite. So I was just mentioning, and it might have been when you were offline, but I'm actually doing a lot of deals that are between the 7 and 10 year range, which I hadn't seen probably over the past like 4 years. A lot of those were, people were pushing for 1 year, which is hard to do, or 3 year. Now, 5 is kind of the minimum, and I think landlords know that too. They're willing to ask for that and make sure it's happening unless it's an as-is situation. But I'm seeing a much stronger commitment to long-term leases, which is great for all parties.
Ryan, what are your thoughts about both rates and terms of lease? What are you saying?
I think rates are ticking up a little bit. Again, we're in Class A space, so I mean, we have the ability. I mean, we're obviously leasing a large building out here at the Atlas building, and I mean, those rates are better than what I thought they would be at this point. Lease up is better. Term, I mean, we're getting everything we have is greater than 5 years. We're probably more in the 7 to 10. They're we can give some TIs in there too. That's the other thing is if a tenant's out there and it's like, hey, you want to go pay for your own TIs, there's a cost to that money where they can use the landlord's cash, but you amortize that over a longer period. So that's probably part of what's pushing those longer terms too. Is like Abby said, people want turnkey. They want to put less money into a building they don't own. Well, we're looking at that as like, okay, well, we're amortizing that. The longer the term, the better the rate's going to be if you want everything turnkey. So that is happening. We don't get anybody that's really asking for anything shorter than that. It doesn't even come up on RFPs for the most part.
And Justin, what are your thoughts on those 2 points?
Yeah, I mean, they hit most of it. We haven't seen that there really never was this huge dip in rates. It was shorter term leases. The people that were making moves, up until the last couple of years were trying to find highly improved space that maybe recently had improvements put into it. Great example, the Mies Block building downtown where Tupelo Honey's at. Microsoft had leased this beautiful space, put a ton of cash into it. And then essentially it was a sales division that went fully remote. And so we were able to go back out and lease that space as is at really a pretty solid rate on a much shorter term lease because those improvements had been fully amortized at that point. Ryan nailed it. Feels like almost everybody's looking for a project of some kind at this point. They're stepping into space that they want to make their own, and that costs money. And the best way to keep your lease rate aggressive while spending that money is to do a longer term. So seeing a lot of 7 and 10s with a huge asterisk that almost all of them have rights to terminate, could have contraction rights, could have expansion rights. So, you kind of hinted at people seeking flexibility. Yes, 100% they are. People are requiring flexibility, but they're also willing to do more of a firm term with that flexibility baked into the negotiation at a cost, at a fee, at a penalty, but still there if they have to pull the trigger on something.
I'm going to stay with you for just a minute, Justin. For our audience's knowledge, we all have a quick meeting a couple of days before this event just to go through a couple things. When we met on Monday, Justin, you mentioned that you're seeing an uptick in a kind of a flight or interest in B space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want to give you a second to just talk about that for a minute or two.
Yeah. Well, part of it is, and Ryan hinted at this, there's been so much leasing velocity in the Class A market that there's lower vacancy there. We had one quick little thing that we pulled. So there's 93,000 square feet of positive absorption year to date. 57% of that leasing has occurred in the Class A market. And I'm actually shocked it wasn't even more than that. But 57% means that if you're sitting in the Atlas building and you're a tenant that is looking for a training or a conference, opportunity within the building, on-site retail, the bike storage, all these bells and whistles, you're probably going to start with a property like Ryan's. As that space becomes more occupied, people are starting to shift to, other really, really great buildings that maybe have a few less bells and whistles or might be a little bit older, but have probably recently undergone some sort of recent renovation. Abby kind of hit on the fact that in the B market, most of those landlords have already improved lobbies, simple things like updated restrooms. If they didn't have fitness, they added it. They've created outdoor spaces where you can add company culture by having food trucks or different community type engagement happen within the space. So an example that we talked about earlier this week, Westridge Office Park, which is the old Pomerantz development, literally right next to Valley West Mall, saw 60,000 square feet of leasing just within the last 6 months. That's a ton. I mean, that's more leasing than that property had seen in the last 4 years. And all the way up to one user, 24,000 square feet, one at 16, that was an expansion. One that was 8 was a relocation. And so it's a little bit of all types of activity. So, I know we talk a ton about Class A, and we should, because that's a spotlight of the market, but we would be remiss to not mention that in that BB plus market, we've seen quite a bit of velocity pick back up there as well.
We only have probably about 5 or 6 minutes before we need to start wrapping things up. I would like to kind of go around to each of you and ask you, what areas are you closely watching for activity or redevelopment, for things that might really be kind of move the needle for the Des Moines Metro? Ryan, what are you watching closely as far as things that could really have a big impact in Des Moines?
The grand experience in West Des Moines, keeping an eye on that and kind of how things move in that direction. The Midtown, West Des Moines Midtown, the 50th to 22nd Street. That's probably another good point is as that gets redeveloped, that Class B space in some of those sections probably really benefits from improvements around it. Those are probably the two main areas that we're looking at. And then outside of office, trying to keep an eye on industrial and what's happening there with the absorption and when spec is going to be appropriate again. So yeah, those are probably the two that I focus on.
And Abby, what are you watching?
Yeah, I kind of geek out about like planning and zoning stuff. And I say that generally because I like to know when, new developments are coming to communities. And I say that because, over the past couple years, I've really learned that for small businesses and mid-sized businesses, their CEOs and presidents and people in charge often don't like to commute. And so if I know a fancy development is going up somewhere, there's probably some business owners who want an office close to that development. And I think the same applies to, the retail space. I know that's not the focus today, but I like to know where the rooftops are going up because I think it tends to kind of draw in then those office needs, those retail needs. And being way ahead of the game, understanding what a city and a community are going to look like futuristically, play a lot into kind of who I target and how I target tenants.
And Danielle, what are you looking at?
Yeah, so I would say downtown, the things that we're keeping our eye on, certainly the Global Plaza, soccer stadium for Iowa, the city of Des Moines. I'm sure everybody's seen those RFPs for the historic buildings. What could come of those and what could that spur for development around those is something that I think everybody is probably keeping an eye on. Out west, Ryan mentioned them, but yeah, Valley West and the Grand Experience for sure. But then we also keep a close eye on what's going on in all of our suburbs. I mean, certainly for a number of years, Waukee has had tremendous growth, but Grimes, Norwalk, Bondurant, they're all experiencing significant growth, development opportunities, and what happens there impacts everything from residential to office, but also even, you know, civic and infrastructure needs that just has a trickle down effect.
And Justin, what are you watching these days that our audience would be interested in and that could really be influential to the future of the community?
Yeah, one piggyback, Danielle kind of nailed something that we haven't talked about much. There is new construction happening in Waukee and Ankeny, and people are getting the rates. DRA, it feels like they build a new building every month and it leases up. And so I think that's a really good side note there. But, you know, we're watching, I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think this market will see over 2 million square feet of office space sell and trade hands. And that's significant. And that's a needle mover. And with that, I think we'll bring a lot of discussion as to revisiting highest and best use. You know, are there conversion opportunities within that 2 million square feet? Specific to downtown, I'll tell you, Matt Anderson was on the news a couple weeks ago, and foot traffic is pretty much at where it was at in 2019. And it's spread out through the day and through the evening. And so I think we'll continue to monitor interest and activity growing. 801 Grand, we haven't talked about, has seen a ton of activity this year. So my opinion and thought is that activity will continue to push forward over the next 12 to 24 months. And then back to the suburban market, just this refresh of, you know, whether it's the B space that, you know, isn't getting quite the spotlight that maybe it should, probably no new construction. So, you know, where does that activity go? Where does it filter to? So those are really the big things. But you know, again, from our perspective, with leasing velocity up and some major trades on the horizon, I think we're sitting in a pretty good opportunity to see this activity continue.
All right, very good. Well, we are just about out of time, and I want to give our panelists an opportunity to give a final takeaway or maybe share something they haven't shared yet during our discussion. And while I give them a minute or two to think about that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris for some housekeeping matters.
All right. Well, if you enjoyed today's programming, we've got a couple events that are coming up here in the future. On October 2nd, we'll have our 90 Ideas in 90 Minutes event. On October 15th, we'll have our Jobs Outlook. And then December 4th, we're going to be doing the third of our Project 515 series on housing on December 4th. You can sign up for all of our events at businessrecord.com/events. If you have story ideas, Michael's the guy to reach out to, especially when it relates to real estate and development. And if it doesn't, you can still reach out his way. He'll make sure to get you to the right reporter for the right thing. That's how we do what we do best, is we get story ideas from the things that you're interested in learning about and sharing with the community. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out our way. Last April, Business Record members received the latest edition of our annual real estate magazine. You can check out those features from the magazine at businessrecord.com/AREM. Members received that publication at that time, but the stories, a lot of them are about trends and issues that are affecting the industry that hold up still today. It's an annual magazine meant to be done in that way. So, and of course, we want you to stay plugged in each and every week. You can sign up for the commercial real estate e-newsletter at businessrecord.com/sign up. It's free. It's going to have the latest news and transactions each and every week. Would encourage you to sign up for that as well. On that note, we'll go ahead and turn it back to the panelists here for a final takeaway, and we'll go in reverse order that we just were going there. So Justin, why don't you take us away with a final thought?
Yeah, final thought is like I said, kind of continued opportunities in the office market. It's not as bad as everyone thinks, or you know, when you see these flash headlines of historical vacancy and you know, don't believe the hype. There's a lot of activity that's happening that's very, very positive, both downtown and suburban. And I'll tell you, we're having a record year on the office market in 2025, and I think we're going to surpass that in 26.
Good to hear. I said reverse order, and now I can't remember who came right before you. So I'm just going to go with Danielle. So Danielle, we'll go with you next.
Sure. Well, one, I love the optimism that everyone has had on this, because it has been kind of a doom and gloom out there. So it's nice to talk with a group of people that have the kind of optimistic approach and thought that you all have. I would just say I also am really happy to see some of the absorption that's happening in the reuse of the buildings downtown. We don't often talk about it, but the reality is, you know, reusing a building is the most sustainable approach. It keeps all of the materials out of the landfill and it brings density to our downtown core. So there's a lot of just added benefits in general to that I hope people keep in mind. And as they're thinking about what to do next, that you know, use of those existing spaces actually is a great way to go, if you have that as an option. So other than that, thank you so much for hosting this very important conversation.
Absolutely. Abby?
Yeah, mine's a boring answer because I'm going to second the optimism. I just think there's a lot of really positive momentum in our market. I think Des Moines is a really amazing market because we have so much going for us. I would also say that for individuals thinking that they might have a need, the earlier you can start having those conversations, the better. Because I do think with a lot of market change, it's good to understand what's going on, what the expectations realistically should look like. So I would say engage as quickly as possible if you're seeking space, and don't be afraid because as Justin said, it's really, there's a lot of positive momentum, and I think it's only gonna continue.
All right, Ryan, wrap us up.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me to be on the panel. Really appreciate it and enjoyed it. We work across a lot of different sectors. We have industrial, retail. We're in Johnston, Waukee, West Des Moines, Norwalk. We have ag holdings around the state, and I think we appreciate everything that the state, all the way down to all the municipal levels, provides for businesses and for landlords. I think you live here long enough, and maybe you look past some of those things, and I think everybody in this community really benefits from just how good everything is here. And it shouldn't be looked past by any means. We've got a lot of optimism in the market. We've taken some big bets in this market, and we see it really moving forward, and things only getting better.
Well, thank you, Ryan, and thank you to all the panelists for being on today and giving us a little bit of an insight into what you're experiencing and seeing. Some final thank yous here. Thanks again to Midwest One and Iowa Finance Authority, who helped make today's program possible as our presenting and supporting sponsors to help make this series available to the community so that we can have this type of dialogue. The stories that we're able to write after having these type of conversations are super valuable. It gives Michael direction on how he can continue to pursue things. It helps really set us up for the year to continue talking about the topic. So thank you again to our panelists for helping us out with that. And of course, thank you to our audience for being here today. If you're not already a member, we'd love to have you as a member of the Business Record. You can do that at businessrecord.com/membership. Your support helps us continue to put on programs like this so that we can help educate the community, help make everybody feel connected so that they can do business better. That's what we're here to do. So finally, a big thank you to Michael Crum, who did a fantastic job absent his internet and his remote work environment, which maybe we need to talk about that, Mike. I'm just kidding. But Michael does a great job each and every week with commercial real estate and did a fantastic job with putting a great panel in place today. So thank you, Michael. Again, my name is Chris Konetsky. We're working hard each and every day to help you and your business. And if we can ever be of any help, please feel free to reach out our way. Thanks again for being here. Have a great afternoon.